At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soulblazer.
Hello, this is the Super NES podcast, episode number 252. These are your faithful hosts. I'm Greg, he is Joe.
Hello.
Here to bring you another game. Actually, our first planned 2025 game when we sat down recently and hashed our list for the year. So, I believe this was your pick, Joe?
Yeah, this was my pick.
Okay, so we're covering two games today because they're both related to one another very much, which we'll get into here with the actual podcast discussion as to how much these games actually related to one another. But we're covering the Micro Machine games for the Super NES. Both the original one, and also Micro Machine, and also a sequel, which has a subtitle of Turbo Tournament. So, Joe, what made you pick these games to cover? And had you played either one of these games before in either Super NES or other console versions before?
Yeah, so needless to say, growing up with my NES, Micro Machines was my jam. I am a product of the 80s, so Micro Machines were all over my house. So I mean, I love the NES game. I knew that there was a Super Nintendo game, but I never played it because creature of habit. I always go back and play the regular NES game. As far as Micro Machines 2 Turbo Tournament, when I started emulating games in the early 2000s, I came across that game for the Genesis, and that's what I ended up playing quite a bit and really enjoyed it. So I figured, hey, you know what? Both games were released for the Super Nintendo. It's a game and a franchise that I love, so let's give it a whirl. Plus, I mean, we got to clear out these games, right?
Right. And so we'll get into this later on, but the sequel mostly only came out in Europe, so you never played that version, that version before the podcast, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So the development of these games is actually somewhat interesting. So, but before we get into that, we should probably talk about the actual Micro Machines themselves, because there may be viewers out there who do only have a passing familiarity of these things. I'm sure I had Micro Machines as a kid, but I don't remember per se. What I remember having is a lot of Hot Wheels. You like the other generic spin-offs of those. I may have had some Micro Machines. I really don't remember per se, but Micro Machines were like Hot Wheels are basically like model toy cars that originally came out from Gloob in 1987. So Gloob's now part of Hasbro. Because just like nobody really talks about this, but the toy industry has undergone as much buyouts and takeovers and consolation as the video game industry has in recent years. Because pretty much these days it's like Hasbro and Mattel, and that's it. So it really has come down to a very tight market in that area compared to like years past. But and Micro Machines were popular. They came out originally. They've also released they have also released licensed cars and trucks over the years. The Gravedigger truck, Star Trek, Star Wars, Babylon 5, Power Rangers, James Bond, Men in Black, Indiana Jones, NASCAR, and G.I. Joe have all had Micro Machine themed cars come out for them over the years. Yeah,
as a kid, I had the Back to the Future set, which was really cool because it coincided with Back to the Future 2 and 3.
Okay, yep.
I had a ton of the Star Trek and Star Wars themed ones. Those were cool, and they also had little play sets where it was like a bust of a character. We'll use the example of R2-D2, and it would open up and it would be a full play set. And it would have, figures that would come with it, and it also had like the little vehicles, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, Wikipedia has a picture of set from the 90s.
Yeah.
And it looks very, very intense, much more intense than the old Playmobil sets I remember as a young kid, for sure. Yeah. So there's been three periods of time in which the Micro Machines have been available in the market. The first period was the longest, 1997 to 2007. So they were manufactured by either like Galoob or Hasbro for like 20 years. Mm-hmm. So eventually sales fell. They stopped production. In 2015, there was a revival of the brand, but it looks like it was mostly tied into Star Wars. I couldn't find examples of that like that revival doing anything outside of Star Wars themed Micro Machine stuff. So that was teamed in. So that was tied into some of the new movies and movies that only lasted a year. So 2015, 2016. Then in 2020, a smaller toy company called Wicked Cool Toys acquired the rights to Micro Machines and relaunched them to the market, which are still available today. So some of the newer ones include like muscle cars, farm vehicles, racing vehicles, construction, like off-roads. Mm-hmm. So kind of different than how they were in the past, but they are still available today. So. And so given the popularity of the toys over the years, there have been quite a number of video games made. We're going to be covering the first two video games, the Micro Machine theme that came out. Micro Machines 1991 and Micro Machines 2 Turbo Turbo 1994. But there were other games made over the years. There's also Micro Machines Military of 1996. Micro Machines version 3, 1997, Micro Maniacs 2000, Micro Machines from 2002, Micro Machines version 4 2006, and Micro Machines World Series from 2017. So, that's fairly recent for a game. There may be another game coming out at some point in the future. I wouldn't say it's, impossible, but, So
I doubt it.
Even though sorry, yeah, well,
I was just saying I doubt it because the 2017 game is good because it's just it's an updated and prettier version of like the original Micro Machines game, but it was not very well received among the individuals who had purchased it.
Yeah, so one thing I found curious doing the research is that even though Micro Machines are an American invention, they are sold worldwide, and it seems like the brand's had more success in Europe than it has in the U.S. because a lot of the games were developed in Europe, and a lot of the games were sold either originally or just in the European market, which I found to be very curious. Yeah. So it could be because Europe is more race happy than the U.S. market is. Yeah. I mean, racing games do better over there. There's more of them, so they're much more into racing over there in Europe because you have like the F1, the F1 circuit. You also have like the off-road stuff and whatnot and whatnot. So yeah, racing just seems to be bigger in Europe than it is over here in North America. So that's probably like one reason for that. So, and we'll get into that. That directly affects these two games as well, which we'll talk about here in a moment. So Micro Machines has a pretty interesting history. As Joe mentioned, the NES version did come out first in 1991. Did you realize, Joe, that game was unlicensed?
Yes, because I had that giant gold cart and it had the dip switch in the back.
there's actually a very interesting reason for that. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but so the game was developed by Codemasters, which was one of two companies I think that circumvented the NES lockout chip and released games unofficially. I'm not counting Tengen because Tengen was originally a licensee of Nintendo before they decided to change things. Right. But there was another company besides Codemasters that produced unlicensed games. I don't remember what the name of the company is off the top of my head, but there was somebody else. There was somebody else who did that as well too. But
Wisdom Tree.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. So, but however, it was discovered too late after production. After production of a bunch of ROMs, after a bunch of ROMs and carts had already been manufactured, that the game had a very easy to trigger bug that nobody in quality assurance had caught, because the bug basically was if a player tried to reverse the first race, the game crashed. But none of the game testers thought to actually try to reversing the game, thought to do that. So very easy. So this is why quality assurance was so stressed by everybody back in the day, because it's like, nowadays it's like no big deal. We just release a patch for it, push it online, whatever. Back then, this spent like months wasted, tens of thousands of dollars spent on cards that you can't do anything with. They have to throw away. So the company panicked, and they ended up inventing kind of last minute off seat of their pants, a device that was kind of like a miniature game genie to fix the bug, because the bug was actually triggered by a simple one binary bit was all that was needed in the code to fix it. So they invented this device, attached it onto the NES cart, and shipped it out that way. That's why the NES carts for this look so strange, because it's like they had this like converter attached to it, so you can actually like play the buggy game.
Interesting.
Basically, Nintendo did sue over this, but over this and Codemasters, but basically the courts did say that they had the right to do this. However, many stores wouldn't carry unlicensed games because of fear of Nintendo's retribution in those days.
Yep.
Other stuff. So the games didn't, like their games, backup machines included, did not, even though the game reviewed very well, did not sell as well like they wanted to do so. So with that, Codemasters decided to license the game out to other companies to get the game released on other consoles, so at least they could recoup some money, making this product. So various companies handle the development and ports of the game to other systems in the systems like the years to come. So the Genesis version came out in 1993. There was also a version that came out for the Amiga that same year. In 1994, saw the release of the Game Gear version, a Master System version, a DOS version, a CDI version, and the Super NES version also came out in Europe that year, with the North American release following in December of that year. 1995 saw the release of the game, the Game Boy as well too. So. Some of these versions were Europe only. Some of these versions got released, in North America as well as Europe. You mentioned the 2017 games, kind of like remake of the first game, Jill. There actually was an official remake of this game done much earlier than that. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there was a release of this game for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube and Game Boy Advance in 2002 and 2003.
Oh, I did not know that.
Which basically just had, which was basically like an enhanced version of the game, but anyway, so the company that got the rights to develop the game, to port the game over to Super NES was a company called Merit Studios, which was a European-based company, England to be specific, that was founded in 1987. They did a bunch of games over the years, but being in Europe, most of their games were released in the European markets. Not many of their games came out here in North America. They've since rebranded the company. They rebranded the company's now known as, I'm not really sure how to pronounce this correctly, Eutechnyx, EUTECHNYX Limited. Is what they're known as now. So they primarily have already since 1997 they've only developed to 97. They've only worked on racing games. They're probably best known for like the Ride to Hell franchise, and also they work in some of the NASCAR the game franchise as well. Also, so and then the Super NES version of the game was published by Ocean Software. We've already talked about like in the other podcasts. I won't spend too much time on them right now. But Codemasters themselves, by the way, is still around today. again, another company, that's in England. So they're not owned by EA. So they like they mostly work with like an EA, licensed branded games. But anyway, Micro Machines was primarily the game's pretty similar to like its ports. You have more experience with you have more experience like the gameplay, Joe. And since like I said, the experience didn't change too much for whatever version of the game that you're playing. Yeah. I want to talk about the gameplay. The game for us.
Yeah. So, one of the cool things about this game is if you have a multi-tap, this is up to 4 players. That is also true for the NES game, which was a feat at the time. Here on the Super Nintendo, we've seen games that can do 4 players. It's not that impressive here, but still cool that it's an option. Basically, you could select your racer. You have a qualifying race. First qualifying race is speedboats in a tub. Once you win that qualifier, you have 3 regular races. You choose opponents for those races. As you win races, opponents are eliminated. Generally, it's whoever's in last place. And basically, you keep racing till you are the sole survivor. It sounds really simple. That's because it is. It's super fun. There's 25 races that you have to do in total. I think competition is hit or miss. I found some races I would pull way ahead and have no issues winning, but then there were others where I felt like I was, I had an AI guy like right on my butt, and if I had messed up even the slightest little bit, they would pass me. Yeah, I mean it's racing, man. If you like RC Pro AM, this is going to be right up your alley. It's not that isometric view. It's top down. There's a lot of shortcuts in the tracks that you can discover. And I honestly do not think that they were there purposely by the programmers. I just think that it's one of those things you can adapt to playing the game, as long as you're it's like within like half an inch of the track. If you go within half an inch of the track outside of the line and cut through things, it's not going to respawn you. But if you do go too far, it will respawn you, just to give you a heads up. Yeah, it's racing, man. It's fun. There's just something to be said for simple games like this. I know this is jumping at least a little bit ahead, but like prime example, there is no music when you're playing this game. It's just the roar of the engine, which can be annoying, let's be fair. But that being said, like, this is a classic, at least the one for the NES. I securely say that for this version as well. And it's that way because of the gameplay. It doesn't matter the music. There was no music on the NES one, probably because of hardware limitation, in all honesty. But, like, yeah, it's fun. And you add in the multiplayer aspect where you can race head-to-head. That adds a whole new dynamic, because now you're not only, racing a race, but on top of that, it's like a knockout kind of thing. So if you exceed far enough away from your opponent to where they drop off screen, they basically get eliminated, and you score a point. If you score 4 of those, you win the race. Which I think is fantastic, because it's not one of those where you have to develop a split screen. You don't have to worry about programming, 2 different parts of the track at the same time so that there's 2 players side by side. 2 players, 2 controllers, 1 console, 1 TV, 1 screen, and you duke it out. And it really does give you some back and forth. I remember as a kid, I would let my sisters play with me. And then we would play like head to head, and they sucked. Let's be fair. So, I would rock them, but also at the same time, like, I would be that brother who would, like, let them get ahead by 3 points and then, literally go and just sweep them. But, you can prolong your gameplay that way.
Difficult settings for the game would have been nice, I think, but, they can handicap yourself for situations like that. I think they would, multiplayer is great, as you mentioned. Obviously, I didn't play a multiplayer, but I know you're not the only person to say multiplayer was great. I'm saying, at least if they allowed the option to handicap somebody, that would help. To help that be even better. But it just wasn't done much in those days, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I did like is that rubber banding wasn't really a thing yet, so. You can pull away and, lap cars if you're that good. I only did that on the breakfast table, the second race, because that's a track that I've played I don't know how many times. That one, and obviously the boats when you're in the tub. Not the qualifier, because that's, I believe, only one lap or maybe two. But there's a track later on where you're doing that, and you have your 4 laps, and you can definitely pull away. But I mean, that's and that's another thing. Like, each area, you get a different set of vehicles that you get to race. You race the same areas multiple times, because, like I said, it's 25 races to be able to beat the game. So you start off with the bathtub, and you get your powerboat racing. Then there's the breakfast table, where you get the 4x4 truck racing. Your work desk, which gives you the sports car. The garage, which is the Warrior Racer, which is, I guess it's Mad Max inspired. It's not expired. If you look at the intro at the beginning of the game, you can kind of see the grill where it kind of looks like teeth, and there's like these horns sticking forwards. So clearly Mad Max inspired. Then you have the garden, where what they call rough trucks. It's basically monster trucks. They're monster trucks. They just didn't have the branding to be able to say they're monster trucks. Then you have the sandbox, which you get turbo wheels, which is essentially a dune buggy. Another one of my favorites, at least the first time that you race on it, is the pool table. You get the F1 racers. That's fun, but most people going in for the first time will probably fly off that track and onto the floor, just because of the fact that those F1s are quick, and it's quicker than anything else you've raced so far. After that, you got the greenhouse. In the greenhouse, you're racing choppers. Choppers are definitely one of those where I'm kind of like, it's cool, it's there, but we really didn't need it. I don't know. The floaty controls, it's not my favorite to race, for sure. Then later on, you have, I called it the carpet level, but it looks like it's a kid's room. It looks like it's blue carpet. It's got different toys and everything around it. I'm assuming it's a kid's room. It's carpet. But you get to, quote unquote, race tanks. There are multiple ways that you can avoid kind of racing, and that's literally just shoot your opponent, blow them up, and then just keep moving forward. But yeah, and that's all the vehicles that you have, all the levels. You have a total of 10 characters that you can choose from. Annie, Bonnie, Chen, Cherry, Dwayne, Emilio, Jethro, Joel, Mike, Spider, and Walter. And Spider is always my guy. I always choose Spider. Spider's cool looking. He's always been my dude. I think the most disappointing thing, that other than no music, would definitely be when you beat all 25 races and you beat the game, it's just a picture of your player sitting inside a trophy. That's it.
Yeah, we should mention also that the game does have like two different game modes: Micro Machines Challenge, like head-to-head.
Yeah.
Joe's primarily talking about the Micro Machines Challenge mode here.
Correct.
Head-to-head is more simple. Head-to-head, just basically you can do either like single player or like a multiplayer. And that mode does have some handicaps built into the characters themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, what I said before about handicaps was, I wish there was an option to pick handicaps, but this mode at least has handicaps built into the characters themselves. Yes. So basically, and that one just basically what it sounds like, just head to head. So it's like a much more simple play mode. And I use head to head to get familiar with the game at first before it changed over to the Micro Machines Challenge mode.
Nice.
So, again, I'm going to rely upon your experience here, Joe. Because the game was ported to so many consoles and different companies handled each port, there's significant differences between each version of the game because of that reason.
Right.
So, what differences did you see in the Super NES version of the game compared to the NES one that you grew up on?
I really didn't notice too much. I noticed, obviously, I guess we'll get into graphics now because that's going to be a good point of contention here. So the biggest thing is obviously the graphics are upgraded here compared to the NES port. The tracks look great. The environments that they're in look fantastic. All the little things that are around you look great. Sprites are big. Obviously the cars are micro, but everything else is relatively proportioned. I thought that, if you've played the NES version, you kind of know what you're getting into here. This is just a slightly advanced version. And I do mean slightly advanced as far as graphics and whatnot. The only thing I think, because it has been a while since I played the NES version, I don't believe the NES version had tanks. I do remember choppers being in there, but I think the tanks were in addition for this game. And, I probably should have fact-checked that before we went on to record, but I didn't. I figured if I'm wrong, you will correct me. But I believe that is the only difference. I believe the same thing goes for the NES. I think there's 25 races that you have to complete. I don't think they had a head-to-head or challenge mode, but they might have. Like I said, most of the time, Micro Machines, if I'm playing single player, it's, I'm playing the challenge. Not doing anything other than that. And then, of course, multiplayer, you do the whole back and forth thing. So, yeah. I mean, are there any differences that you're going to throw at me?
Well, besides the better graphics and some of the other things, I believe the tanks were at it.
Okay.
The Super NES version is very similar. The Super NES is very similar to the Genesis version of the game, or Mega Drive version, as it's known in Europe, because they were developed about the same time. The biggest difference in the game, but one I can't comment on because I never played the original NES version, was that the Super NES Genesis version of the game, they changed the handling of the car, the handling of the Micro Machines to get more of an on rails feel. So
okay,
so I thought it was fine. The handling of the game felt good to me after a while. Once you get the hang of it, it's fine. So, and
I think I played the original so much that the handling never even crossed my mind. Because now that you mentioned it, the way it used to be on the NES game, you could easily get out of control if you're going fast enough. That's why I mentioned the F1 racers. You get going pretty fast, and if you misjudge a turn, you're flying. And you're correct. That was kind of minimized here. It still happens, but it's not as apparent as it was on the NES. So
they also added in rotations to the vehicle sprites for smoother movement, which also I think helps with you, which I think also helps with keeping your car under control.
Yeah.
Because even though physically nothing's changed, you're getting like more visual feedback beyond your car doing that. So so your brain knows to adjust so and so to keep yourself up like on course or whatnot. But those are the biggest changes. So. Also, for the record, speaking about like changes, the 2002 version of the game basically didn't really change too much. That version of the game just basically has like advanced, like better graphics, and the drivers in that version of the game had unique vehicles.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but anyway,
yeah, I definitely have to find that version of the game because I've never even heard of that.
It was mostly released in Europe only, which is why you probably have a hard time. Again, like I said before, most of these games were released in Europe only for some reason. But the only version which came out of that remake, which came out here in the States, was the PS2 version.
Oh, okay.
So everywhere else was Europe only. So that's probably why you missed it, because I'm sure it wasn't a big release. So
yeah.
And 2003 is kind of late for the PS2 lifespan too, I think. So
yeah, I mean that would have been 3 years into the console.
More than that, I think. The PS2 came out in 2000. Was it 2000 or 2001 that came out to North America?
I thought it was late 2000, but it might have been early 2001.
Something like that, yeah. So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, either way, like Micro Machines. What I'm going to tell you is, if you played this as a kid and you have memories of the NES game, definitely check out the Super Nintendo version. I think it's worth at least looking at and see how much prettier it is.
Speaking about graphics, yeah, I went. I did play the NES version briefly to compare it, and it's like I noticed one big difference between the NES Super NES version, just like all the colors.
Yeah,
they really added in and enhanced like a lot of the colors.
Yep.
So this version of the game is definitely eye-popping because it looks like very good. And like Joe said, it definitely has that. It definitely has that like cute kind of toyish backyard racing kind of feel to it. It kind of reminded me also about like a racing version of like what was that franchise? Army Men, the one with the right. So like house battles.
Yep, that was
like,
Army Men. Yep.
Kind of same thing here with like house races, but we you're racing. You can just imagine like yourself in a micro car with your friends just racing around like a backyard or whatnot.
Yeah, this was Toy Story before Toy Story.
For sure. So.
And I mean, I another thing is like I would totally recommend this game multiplayer. If you have a physical SNES, I'm sure we'll find out at the end of this podcast what this game goes for, but I can't imagine it's too much. This game, with even if it's just one friend, would be fantastic, but with a multi-tap, man, drinking on a Saturday night with 4 friends playing Micro Machines and just trying to edge each other out, that's a recipe for a good night. Yeah.
So, the only real complaints I have of the game, and I'm curious to see if you had the same complaints, Joe, because like I said, you have a lot more experience with this game than I do. I do bemoan the lack of music because I think they missed an opportunity to have some like great racing music present in the game. But I mean, like you can just if you want to, you can just like mute the sound effects and just play something later on in the background.
Yes.
So there's but I'm just saying. No music in this game does kind of hurt it a little bit, I think. But and the other really only complaint I have, and this is really the only big complaint. I mean, the music is kind of a secondary thing, but the only complaint I have that affects gameplay to me, which hurts the game in my eyes a little bit, but not too much, is that I think the lack of vision in this game is also is a problem. I wish the camera was zoomed out more. It's hard to be able to see things sometimes flying right on top of them, especially like coming up on them on full tilt.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And the only reason in my notes I did not knock the camera is because I have that previous experience with the NES version, because that is also very tight. And so therefore I'm kind of used to playing the game like that. And I know that like the tracks and like, you know what I mean? Like as I got further into the game, it became a little bit harder and I was definitely like, crashing or getting stopped by objects here and there more. But yeah, for me, the biggest knock on this game is the music, but the fact that, it is not only 2 seconds to turn down your TV and play something else. Plus what music is here, in the menus in between races is...
That's not good, yeah.
It's good, but it's so mediocre. Like, you know what I mean? It's very low energy. It's not anything exciting. So the music is a big knock for me on the game. But also, like, this game's pretty popular, and it's popular for a reason because the mechanics are solid, and it's a really good racer. So there's that.
Yeah. This is a good. Yeah, you're right. This is a good time to say. A good time to segue into that. The game reviewed very well when it came out, and still thought of very highly today. All versions of this game have scored pretty highly over the years. The lowest score I'm seeing, period, for any version of the game is 75% of like the Amiga version. So it's like that, and that's the lowest score. So everything else is like well into the 80s and 90s. So right there, that tells you that's a very like thought of like a praised game, and still like it's still like a very popular game today. As Joe mentioned, it's still people really like love the originality, like love the love the sandbox feel, love the multiplayer aspects of it. But there's a reason. There's a reason I did very well. So all the versions of the game did pretty well. So I think people today consider the Genesis and NES versions as being the best, but there's like all versions of this game did review very well when they came out, and they're all like pretty good versions of the game. So no matter what version of the game you have, you definitely get some fun with this late like today, I think. So, once you get used to, once you memorize the courses, then the limited camera angle doesn't hurt you as much. So I would just say like trial or error, give this game a shot. Once you learn the tracks, the camera angle is not going to affect you as much. It's not a very long game, but you're able to know them very well. You can go through the entire game, like 20 of courses, in maybe like an hour and 15 minutes, probably. So based on the long plays I'm seeing like online. This is still like a very very highly thought of game today. So it's no surprise that Codemasters wanted to make a sequel of the game. So to capitalize on that popularity. So unless you have anything else to say about this first game, Joe, let's move on to the sequel.
No, we can move on to the sequel.
So the sequel, Micro Machines 2 Turbo Tournament, came out 3 years later. It came out 3 years later, 1994. Eventually, the original version of the game was for the original version of the game, like the Mega Drive. Version of the game later came out for DOS, Game Gear, the Super NES, and Game Boy. But for some reason, the only version of this game came out in North America was the DOS version. So again, I don't know why that was. I mean, probably because it was a European companies mostly involved with making this game. This game, like the original, was was ported to Super NES by Mirror Studios and published by Ocean Software. Even though the game sold pretty well in the States, I guess they just figured that that they weren't going to bother bringing the game over to North America for whatever reason. So
I do have a theory. And it gets into what I said off mic, where I feel this game is DLC, and we'll get into that. But the one that was released here in the US added a track editor, which is
very cool,
so awesome. But that's something that is offered that, although gameplay is the same and everything seems very familiar, it's at least something new that it's offering. Where you could argue whether you're getting something new with the second game or not.
I should note, however, that the Mega Drive version did get an update in 1985 called Micro Machines Turbo Tournament in '96, which did also add a track editor to the game.
Oh, nice.
As well as also had new race tracks plus new soundtrack.
Oh, nice.
So, and also, I never heard of this program, but there was also a program called Bad Influence, which is a British kind of a quiz kids quiz TV show, and the host of that makes an appearance in this game. He was one of the racers.
Oh, okay.
So that's pretty nice touch, but yeah, like Joe said, this game does feel very similar to the first game. Including that bad camera angle, unfortunately, which you just have to play used to. What's new about this game, what's new about this game that I noticed at least, is that there's some new vehicles to race. You do have hovercraft and helicopters are options. Are options, as for example. I thought that the courses required a bit more. How can I put this? The courses required in the sequel seemed like they required more complicated handling techniques than the first game did. You really had to play these courses, I felt, more to get the feel for how you should handle and race them. I don't think these races I don't think these courses were as simple to master as the first game's was. For various reasons, I thought these courses like more complex and hard to get the feel of at a first race. Well, whether that's a positive or negative depends upon how you see things, but that is one difference I noticed, at least. In playing this.
Yeah. So one of the big taglines for this game, as far as the marketing, is that it was bigger, better, and badder, and
right.
They focused on the fact that there's now 16 characters, and we have some of our returning characters, and then we have some new ones, and then we have the vehicles. I think there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, so 16 vehicles. So
that sounds right.
Yeah, about 16 characters, 16 vehicles. Where this game, and this is why I say it's DLC, because like we were saying, it's very similar to the first game. Challenge mode, head to head, everything is 25 races. Super League is fun. You get put into 4 different divisions, 4 racers in each of those divisions, and then based on how well you race, you move up, blah, blah, blah. 25 races, you get your cup. They also included a time trial here, which is, racing against the clock. That's another way you can have fun in multiplayer. We're racing with your friends, get that good time. There was one other thing I was going to point out, and I'm totally blanking currently. Well,
it's also what's different in this game, and this is only available in Europe. Like I said before, because the Mega Drive, this game only came out in Europe. Codemasters also released something called the J cards.
Oh,
yes, a card that they developed, which allows you to play this game with 8 players, like the different multi-tap.
Yeah.
So. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
I can imagine. I can imagine a race this game with 8 players being nuts.
Yeah, I would imagine so, and that's got to be really taxing that Genesis as well.
Well, I mean, graphically the game looks good, but I wouldn't really say it's pushing the hardware too hard. So
yeah, I
mean, probably yeah. So I mean, because while the graphics look nice, they're not exactly groundbreaking, state of the art things either.
I was going to say, with everything being miniature, you don't have as many assets going towards that graphical overhaul. But
I will say that even though I thought the sequel I like the overall look of the sequel better as far as the tracks and the cars. I thought the sprites looked better for the cars in the first game though, because the ones here in this one definitely look. I mean, they're micro machines, but they really look micro in this version of the game. They're they look smaller to me. They just don't like. It's like, yeah, it's micro machines, but it's like I felt more like I was racing a micro machine in the first game than this one.
And I don't think it's so much that they shrunk the cars. I think they kind of skimped on some of the details that they put on the cars.
That can be the case too.
I think that's what it is, and it makes it seem smaller than it actually is. But man, how'd you feel about racing dragsters?
That's pretty cool. I mean, yeah. So,
I like the idea. Like that threw me for a loop. I was like, okay, like I thought like there was literally going to be like a kind of like dragster level where you would just kind of go forward and do what dragsters do. But no, sure enough, you're making some tight turns with those things. Some of the other new vehicles that they added. And that's an air quote, new vehicles. Kind of, in my opinion, just kind of, I don't know. It's uninspired. So you got like an ATV, which just kind of comes off as like another 4x4 truck like you had in the first game. You got the rally car, which again kind of looks like the sports car, but not really. You got the beach buggy. You have now the super monster instead of the rough truck. And that's because they had to put dump trucks into the game. You also get the off-roader, the sports car, the convertible. The convertible is the sports car, but for some reason they gave it a whole nother category, whatever. Dragsters, as I mentioned, you have the choppers again. There's the 4x4s. Then the hovercraft and the bug. So they definitely give you a wide variety of vehicles to be able to race. I mean, it's fun. I like the addition of knockout mode here. So knockout mode is what it sounds like. You just race around, and as you complete a lap, whoever's last gets knocked out. Yeah. So.
Sorry, I was going to say like before that there are like 4 different modes in this game, like the game period. So so like leagues, time trials, single race, and tournaments. When multiplayer has knockout and share games as well too. So real quick, leagues is just basically you're just like competing for points. Out of points in divisions, plays the most point like a points advance, and so on. Time trial is what Joe mentioned before, just racing against like yourself or Shadow Racer, like Mario Kart. Single race is just basically the main, quote unquote, the main game mode of the game. Yep. So, and tournaments is just where like it's a series of fixed races. And like you're trying, to win those races, to win the game. So, knockout. Joe just talked about share games. Sounds interesting. Share games is similar to single race, but the cars are colored according to the team. So it's kind of like it's like more like team racing as opposed to like single racing. If you do badly, you can still win. Like your friend does it very well, for example. Yeah,
that mode was interesting. I wanted to check it out, but obviously I don't have multiple people to be able to check it out.
Sure.
But yeah, it's you got 4 teams. You get your buddies and 4 people. And like Greg said, you're all the same colors, so it's like you guys versus the rest of them. And correct, like I mean, if your buddy's in first. Obviously you would want to be second or at least try to compete for that first spot. But in reality, if you're just trying to beat the game, you can't hang back. Your buddy's going to get the points for the team. So, it's very cool. I thought of that mode as like I have to play with my little brother. but I still want to beat the game. So then you're just carrying him. But yeah, like I said, this really does feel like DLC. There are a few things that, they tweaked here and there. There's still no music. Why is there still no music? The drown of the engine, just for me, like, it's fine, but I remember even growing up with the NES version, I would mute the sound and play the game.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, man. I really hate that there's no music. Like, it really bothers me. Because this is a great game, and, the sequel's just as good with the DLC aspect of it. I feel like if you own one, you don't need to technically own the other. It's all going to come down to familiarity. And that's why I think, honestly, this wasn't released in the US, except for with the DOS version.
Well, I should say that, yeah, so I did, I should say, the programmer made an opinion, about that. He just said that he suspected the game wasn't released over here because the North American market is very difficult to compete in. So, and Codemasters was not a huge company. That's not official, but that's like his thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's fair. And this is, you said 95, right?
94 for Genesis version, 95 for the ports.
Okay. So, I mean, it's still, the PlayStation and Saturn are still way off. So, it's not even like I could sit there and be like, well, it's going to compete with the 32 bits, but it's not. I don't know. I felt like that was the whole reason they didn't release it here, in my opinion, and that's why we got the DOS version, because it's got the track editor, so it kind of makes it worth it to resell the same game with a different coat of paint.
Yeah, Plus, also, the computer market's totally different than the console market.
Right,
Back then anyway,
right.
so
Yeah, especially in '94, man. Woo. Yeah. So.
Another cool thing about the tech of this game, however, is that the Mega Drive version of the game included a what's called NVR, a non-volatile memory chip that stored your lifetime playing game achievements.
Oh, that's cool.
So, it's not a battery per se,
right?
But it does save some of your some of your information.
That's cool.
So, and the update the Mega Drive version got later on, the Turbo Tournament 96, really sounds like a great update. The new tracks, actual music of the game for once.
Yeah.
Plus the track editor that was in the track editor that was originally seen in the PC version of the game. So that really that version sounds like that version sounds like the version to play. Yeah. I did not play that version of the game because I spoke because you folks have Super Nintendo version of the games, but that really does sound like a worthwhile version of the game. So
yeah, it's definitely a version of the game I'm now gonna have to look for after we're done recording.
And the sequel also reviewed very well, also sold very well. Just that some people did complain that there was, that was too similar to the original, which is always a hard thing to do with a sequel.
Right.
Because it's like you're not going to please everybody on that front. Some people are going to want it very close. Other people are going to be like are going to want huge differences. You're never going to win that battle. So, but anyway, so that's that one complaint aside. The game reviewed just as well and sold just as well as the original version of the game did. So, but anyway, so yeah, it's like Micro Machines 2 is kind of like more of the same. But I felt that if you didn't have the original game, there was definitely enough here present in this game to warrant buying it. If you already had the original game, whether or not the changes to this game were enough to warrant buying it again, that's a harder question.
Yeah.
That's one I can't really answer. That's more like a personal question up to you as to what you're looking for and how much you enjoyed the game. But I think personally there was enough here to warrant buying it again. But especially the original Mega Drive version. But like I said, that's more a personal choice for everybody involved.
Yeah, and, I mean, growing up, man, like Codemasters for me was a good company. Like, as far as like the games they offered, I never really had an issue with them. I know some people didn't like those, like the Quattro Sports or Quattro Adventure games for the NES that they made. But like that was my introduction to like Dizzy, and the sports game had like BMX Simulator and whatnot, and those were originally released for like the Amstrad and like the Amiga and stuff that the ZX Spectrum or ZX Spectrum, if you want to be all British about it. So I mean, Codemasters introduced me to quite a few games, and I think they had a pretty good track record for quite a while. I think it all fell apart in the early 2000s, in my opinion, but that's my opinion on the company. Kind of went on a tangent there. Sorry, buddy.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So that's why. So yeah, that's probably why Codemasters like agreed to be bought by the EA by EA back like in 2020.
Yeah.
So, So I don't see them. Yeah. So I don't see them having worked anything recently. The last game I see that they worked on was Need for Speed was Need for Speed Unbound in 2022. So they're still around, but I can't find anything they've done recently since then.
Yeah, that was the last thing I had seen as well. Apparently they worked on... Oh, I'm sorry. They've been working on not only the Grid games, but also the F1 games for EA.
Okay, all right, yep that makes sense.
Yep.
So,
and then they also did, which also makes sense, they're doing all the rally games for EA, which makes sense because they had the original Colin McRae on PlayStation. So that makes sense that they continue with that.
Right.
So.
Yep, for sure. Yep. So anyway, so in conclusion, like both these games I think still hold up pretty well today. They're both still like very fun. Which one you prefer playing is more of a matter of personal choice. I think the second game is a little bit better, but it's very close. So, they're both fundamentally the same game because they're around the same engine and whatnot. So it's literally the same engine.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, I'll admit that obviously I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, childhood memories, and all that. So, yes, I'm going to tell you the first game's better, but that doesn't mean it's better. It just means that, me personally, I find it to be better.
Fair. Yep. Yeah. So, fair. So, okay. So, moving on. There were a number of cheats and codes available for this game in other versions. It looks like that Super NES version, for some reason, did not carry over any of those cheats or codes.
Oh.
So for both games, there's nothing available for it for some reason. So you want like other game-breaking codes or cheats, you got to look somewhere else. Another version of the game.
What kind of codes would you have though? Like.
You would ask me that.
I'm just saying because like there's like nothing that like you can get as like an advantage unless it's like, you can have like turbo speed, which I guess could help you, but also like that would be a detriment to what you're doing because you'd be even more out of control with certain cars. So
the Genesis version of Micro Machines 2 allows you to access has a code allow you to play a swinky tennis game, like whatever that is.
Okay.
And then the original game had with it. Hold on a second here. I gotta like put it up again. I did not bother to write down the codes available in the other versions of the game. Huh. The original game had codes in other versions for all like raw vehicles going like warp speed. Had a code for always being in like first place. Had a code for head-to-head mode, where so we can do like where you can make a race 1 lap or 9 laps, or give like both players like max speed, for example.
There we go, max speed.
Yeah. there's a hidden puzzle mini game, the Game Boy version of the game. You can also access you can also access the RAM test screen on the NES version of the game as well, which you can do. Which you then use to give you things like I co-op, I race, extra lives, better crashes, better handling mode, infinite lives, or turbo mode. So, so the original version of the game has like quite a lot of codes available for different.
Yeah.
I could go on and on and on. There's a lot of codes available for this game, but according to Game FAQs, none of these codes carried over to the Super NES version of the game for either version of the game. So, I don't know why. Because some of those codes sound pretty fun. It's it's kind of a shame the Super NES version of the game that doesn't have them.
Yeah.
But eBay was a bit of a challenge for this game because of the fact that the games are almost titled the same. So trying to search for one versus the other by itself is very, very difficult. And also the fact that the sequel only came out in Europe only for the Super NES. So I did the best I could. I did the best I could of this. Please take this like a grain of salt. However, so the games are fairly common on eBay. I only searched by North America. I only searched by North American copies. So it's like that means most of these results are going to be for the first game. There are some copies of the second game that are available here in North America, like already. But if you're going to expand your search to Europe, you can find a lot more copies of the game as long as you're willing to pay the higher shipping prices.
Right.
So that's why a long time ago I decided to limit the search to only North American copies. So. 42 copies of the game for both games were listed on eBay. 23 copies of the game had recently sold. Card pricing is actually fairly expensive. This is true for both the first and second game, probably because of the fact the game is still very popular today. Even though it's so well, I think high demands keep the kind of. I think high demand and the fact the games have never been re-released, probably because of licensing issues.
Right.
It's definitely keeping the prices good. Card only prices both for either version of the game. These prices include shipping. Sold copies ranging from $34 to $69.
Yeah,
so
it's not horrible.
35 is a bit pricey to pay, but not horrible. Yeah, it's just it depends on how much you love the game.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, look at it this way: it's a racer, and comparable racers like Mario Kart, you'd be paying at least that. So makes sense.
CIB copies. This is a rare case where CIB copies. There weren't any sold recently. Just because of I think it's just a bad time of the year to be selling or whatever. So, asking prices for CIB copies of the game for both 1 and 2 on eBay at the time you're doing research sounds fair. They're asking anywhere from $130 to $160 CIB, which I think, depending on what the card's going for, seems like a fair price. I just had bad luck. As of right now, there hadn't been any copies that sold CIB for either game recently. But CIB copies are also going to be harder to come by anyway.
Yeah.
Because of what they are to begin with, et cetera, et cetera. So, these are very good. Yes, these are very good, fun mini racing games for sure. So, and fairly unique. It's I remember Toy Story did do something with one of their games later on. Later on, they had a mini racing game in one of the games, right? I
believe so. Yeah.
Somewhere else, but it's still fairly unique as far as games go to have this. I remember that we played a Hot Wheels arcade game a couple of years ago. That was kind of that also was like toy cars.
Yeah.
The whole engine and camera angles in that game are very different.
Right.
So that was more like of a pseudo 3D perspective because it's a newer game compared to the top-down overhead view that this game uses. So, I think like mini races like this are still fairly unique. There are indie games available on Steam, whatnot. That they rip this off because, like I said, Micro Machines is still a very popular game to this day. Yeah. So there are indie games you can buy that play like this, but so it's still the original games hold up pretty well. If all you're looking for is just like basic mini car racing.
Yeah, I was gonna say Tabletop Racers is a franchise. I think they have 2 entries out. Literally rip everything out of everything from Micro Machines. It's mini cars on obviously tabletops, racetracks, so you get that aspect of it. It has the whole head-to-head where, like, if you pull ahead, you gain a point. And the only thing that really separates it from Micro Machines is that they added items, so you can pick up items to be able to take out your opponent. But it's essentially Micro Machines. And
I've not heard of this.
Yeah,
game, so okay.
If it wasn't for the 2017 game that EA released for Micro Machines, I would say this is like a spiritual successor. But considering we did get that game, I guess technically it's just inspired by.
Right. Yeah. I imagine the games are available on Steam.
Yes. Steam,
okay.
PS4. I mean, they're old enough to where they were even released on the 360 and PS3. But the second game, I think, recently came out in the past couple years. So
they're probably on Switch too, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But okay. All right, yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. So thank you for letting us know about the modern version of the game, basically. So, do the games support like online play?
That's a good question. And I should have known that you were going to ask that. Give me 2 seconds to
no worries.
Check Steam.
No worries. I got to do the editing spiel here anyway. Yeah. So, as always, we appreciate you listening to this podcast. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, suggestions, whatever, feel free to leave them for us on our Facebook page, or you can also email directly to the SNES podcast at yahoo.com. Our next game is going to be a pick from me. We're going to be covering a very early Super NES kind of a venture / RPG game called Draken. Which got a sequel in later years, which is nothing like the original game, which we'll get into the podcast for sure. But I played Dragon when it came out because there wasn't many Super NES games available in 1991. So I have fond memories of it. I haven't got back to the game for a long time, so I'm curious to see how it holds up today. And this will be Joe's first time playing the game as well too. So stay tuned to the podcast next time for Dragon.
Yeah.
Did you find it, Joe, or do you still need like a minute?
There's quite a few. Let me see. All right. So there's Tabletop Racing World Tour that came out in 2016. Current price is $3.99 for the game. If you get the bundle, which includes all the DLC, it's only $5.37. Also, there's a game, I totally forgot about this one, Toy Box Turbos, which literally rips off the Micro Machines logo. So it's clearly wearing its inspiration on its sleeve. That was the other one I was thinking of. That one is $14.99 right now. I'm sorry. Any game that's like 10 years old or more, you should not be paying that much for it. And then the more recent franchise I was thinking of is Super Toy Cars 1 and 2. Those came out in I know the second one came out in 2020, and I think the first one was either 2018 or 19. They came out pretty close to one another. But yeah, all tiny cars doing tabletop racing. It's a concept that people can easily add on to and put their own twist on it. And, I totally forgot to mention, like, in Micro Machines 2, one of my favorite tracks is the pinball machine. even put that in my notes. I underscored it and I still missed it. The detail to the pinball machine and whatnot and then racing around that thing is just amazing. But with these newer games, obviously the graphics are amazing, and they go into super detail. So doing things like racing on a table, you can see like the wood grain and all that other stuff. So as much as I love Micro Machines, they've definitely done better since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. I was not aware of. I knew those games existed, but I didn't know how many of them there actually were out there. So, thank you for that information.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. So, all right. So that's a wrap for this episode. As always, thanks very much for listening to us, and thanks again, Joe, for joining me.
Of course.
We'll see you again next time, folks. Be safe, be well, and catch you again later.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Super power.